It began on the dying world of Arkinder, inside the ancient Great Hall where glowing blue crystals pulsed like fading hearts, casting long shadows across the tall stone pillars that held the weight of history on their cracked backs. And in those shadows stood the young alien leaders of the High Council, arguing louder and louder with every passing second, their voices echoing through the vast chamber like a swarm of angry insects. They argued about power, about fear, about war, about which species was the greatest threat to the galaxy, their words sharp and full of pride. Some pointed at the Vorn Empire, calling them relentless beasts from the dark nebulae. Others warned about the Trinex Dominion, cold and calculating creatures whose armies moved like machine-guided storms. A few even joked about the old Dras clans rising again. But none spoke the word the elders feared most. At the back of the hall, far from the proud voices and shining banners, the oldest elder of Arkinder rose slowly from his stone seat, his hands shaking slightly as he leaned on his trembling staff carved with symbols older than the council itself. His eyes held the weight of memories no one else had, memories of wars the young had never seen, memories of fire falling from moons, memories of strange human ships moving like silent ghosts through black space. The elder raised his voice, soft at first, but so heavy with truth that even the loudest generals stopped talking. He warned them about humans. Creatures, he said, were calm like quiet oceans, until a storm inside them woke. He told them that humans were not weak as the young believed, not soft as their enemies claimed, not harmless as their appearance suggested. He said their kindness was a shield, not a weakness, and when that kindness cracked, something terrifying came out. He spoke of human courage, human sacrifice, human fury, human silence. He said if humans ever felt betrayed, the sky itself would burn. The great hall went silent for a moment, the crystals dimming as if listening. But then the young leaders burst into laughter. They said humans were too small, too fragile, too slow. They mocked Earth as a minor world barely holding itself together. They repeated the old council lies that humans were emotional creatures who broke easily under pressure. One young general slammed his fist on the table and said, "The humans fear us. They always will." Another added with a smirk, "They send peace, not power. They beg for friendship because they know they cannot win a war." Their laughter bounced off the pillars until even the guards chuckled. The elder closed his eyes, pain crossing his old face, because he remembered a time when alien empires said those same words, right before their skies turned red. As the fighting and joking returned, no one noticed the subtle shift in the air, the strange vibration that ran through the crystals, the faint tremble beneath the stone floor. The elder felt it first, a deep pull in his chest, a whisper from the stars, something ancient returning. Across the galaxy, far beyond the bright halls and proud flags, a silent Terran signal went out from Earth Command. A message that carried no words, only activation codes, old codes, forgotten codes, codes that had not been used in 100 years. They were the kind of signals that made old admirals wake from nightmares, the kind of signals that made Black Ops fleets turn their heads toward the void. The elders of Arkinder felt the signal like a cold wind blowing through their bones. They remembered the old stories, the warnings passed down from the First Age, stories of how humans fought with a strange fire inside them, stories of how humans built ships not to dominate but to protect. Yet those same ships could become monsters if ever unleashed. The elder felt his heartbeat slow, because he knew exactly what that Terran signal meant. Humanity had stopped forgiving, and forgiveness was the only thing holding back the storm. Meanwhile, on a moon orbiting the distant world of Lathrix, a small listening post detected something impossible. A transmission from Earth that had been dormant for decades suddenly activated. But instead of a message, it was a countdown. A silent one. No voice, no warning, just a code that spread through subspace like wildfire. The operators panicked, sending alerts to the council, but the council dismissed them as a system glitch. They were blind. They were proud. They ignored the silence behind the signal. Back in the Great Hall, the elder begged the young leaders to listen. He told them that humans reacted slowly but completely, that once they made a decision, they followed it with their whole being, their whole heart, their whole fury. He told them of a time when humans had been pushed too far by an empire that underestimated them, and within one cycle that empire vanished. Not conquered, not enslaved, erased from the star maps, piece by piece, until only legends remained. The elder's voice cracked as he whispered, "Humans do not start the war, they end it." But the council mocked him again. They said old age made him fearful. They said humans had grown soft from peace. They said the galaxy was too big and too strong for humans to ever rise again. They said Earth had no armies worth worrying about. They said humanity had no strength left. But the elder shook his head slowly, knowing something they did not. Humans did not show their strength. Humans hid it. Humans kept it deep, waiting until the moment they had no choice but to reveal it. He remembered watching human fleets move decades ago, silent and disciplined, their ships dark as if absorbing every drop of light. He remembered a single Terran commander who said, "We fight with everything or we do not fight at all." And now that same feeling was returning. Across the stars, human colonies that once seemed peaceful suddenly went dark. Not destroyed, but silent. Terran warships that were thought to be retired suddenly vanished from their parking docks. Terran battalions that spent years doing humanitarian work suddenly disappeared from their bases. Something massive was happening behind the scenes, something humans had planned quietly and patiently. And the galaxy did not see the storm building until it was too late. A young alien leader scoffed at the elder and said, "Humans would never risk a war. They would never dare." But even as he spoke, human stealth fleets drifted through the void like shadows, unseen by scanners, moving toward unknown destinations. On a distant asteroid field, a Terran shipyard hidden behind a false energy signature powered on for the first time in decades. Human engineers sealed ancient war machines with trembling hands, knowing what their activation meant: the end of peace. On the human colony of Vega 9, families watched the sky glow with the ignition of old engines long forgotten by the galaxy. They did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They stood silently, because humans were not going to war out of greed or pride. They were going to war because they had been pushed too far. And on Arkinder, as the elder watched the young leaders laugh, he whispered a final warning only he could hear. "The sky will turn deadly." The crystals above dimmed again, flickering like dying stars. The air grew colder. The elder's staff shook. He felt it coming, a wave of human power spreading across the galaxy like a silent heartbeat. Humans had given the galaxy kindness. Now they would show the other side. The calm before the storm was ending, and the storm had a human face. The next morning across the galaxy, rumors spread like wildfire, twisting through markets, soldier camps, and diplomatic halls as frightened whispers carried the same message. Something was wrong with the humans. It started small, a single report from a patrol ship near the Sol border. The captain's voice shaking as he transmitted that a strange energy wave passed through their systems, freezing navigation, shutting down scanners, and filling the screens with static. And in that static, for a brief second, the crew saw a shadow of something enormous drifting behind Jupiter, something shaped like a ship but too big to make sense. The council dismissed the report instantly, calling it human tricks, and continued laughing, but deep inside, their smiles were thinner now. Meanwhile, on Arkinder, the elder could not sleep. His hands cold as he stared at the stars that once felt comforting but now felt like eyes watching everything. He knew what was coming. He felt it like a shaking heartbeat in the sky, and he walked through the city trying to warn anyone who would listen, but no one did. They told him humans were peaceful, that humans were soft, that humans would never strike back. But the elder remembered something the young had forgotten. Humans did not respond out of pride, they responded out of pain, and once that pain reached the breaking point, nothing in the galaxy could stop them. Far away, on the capital world of the council, the human ambassador stood alone outside the chamber, staring at the sky as if waiting for something only he understood. His eyes were tired, his face calm, but deep inside him something was slowly falling apart. The last pieces of trust breaking as he listened to alien leaders mocking human families, laughing about human losses, and calling humans soft-hearted weaklings. He did not shout, he did not argue. He simply walked away with a silence so cold it made the guards uneasy. They did not know that silence was the final warning. In the council chamber, the aliens celebrated a new resolution. punishing Earth again, restricting Terran trade, and threatening sanctions if humans did not obey. They believed humans would bow, humans would apologize, humans would stay small. But even as they raised their glasses, one of their screens flickered, showing a brief distortion, the Terran flag appearing for half a second before vanishing again, and the entire hall went silent as chills crawled up their spines. On a mining planet near the Spiral Arm, a convoy of pirate ships attacked a lone Terran medical transport, expecting an easy victory. But when they boarded the ship, expecting frightened humans, they found it empty. No crew, no cargo, only a pulsing device in the center of the room. Before they could react, the device activated, sending out a silent wave that erased all their weapon systems and left every pirate drifting helplessly in the void. No explosion, no screams, no sound. The pirates whispered the same words. Humans were here. Fear began to spread, real fear, the kind that makes even powerful empires tremble, because the galaxy was beginning to realize something terrifying. Humans were preparing for something, and they were doing it quietly. Everywhere, Terran colonies locked down communication. Factories shut their doors. Civilian ships vanished into deep space. And old Terran bases that everyone thought were abandoned suddenly became active again. The Council tried to demand answers, but the humans did not respond. Not with anger, not with threats, not with anything. That silence hurt more than any words. On Arkinder, the Elder stood on a cliff overlooking the quiet forests, tears forming in his old eyes, because he knew the galaxy had crossed a line that should never be touched. He whispered into the wind, "You have awakened the storm." His voice cracked with sorrow, not fear, because he knew humans never wanted this, humans never wanted blood, humans never wanted to rise with fire, but they were pushed, mocked, lied to, and betrayed until their kindness broke. And when human kindness broke, the universe always paid the price. The first real shock came when the Council sent a small fleet to inspect Earth again, planning to intimidate humanity into bowing. But when they entered the Sol system, all their engines died instantly, their systems froze, and dozens of ships drifted helplessly through cold space. Their screens filled with a single human message: leave. No sound, no anger, just that one word. And every alien who saw it felt their heart drop, because no one in history had ever seen humans speak with such cold calm. That message spread through every palace and bunker, through every army base and throne room, until even the bravest leaders felt sweat on their skin. The Elder of Arkinder begged the Council to stop before it was too late, telling them that humans were not showing power, they were showing restraint. But the Council, drunk with arrogance, called humans weak animals playing soldier. They said humans would never dare. They said Earth was outnumbered, outgunned, outmatched. They said humanity's silence was fear. The Elder shook his head slowly, heart-breaking, because he knew the truth the young leaders refused to see. Human silence was never fear. Human silence was the sound of something ancient waking up. Something the galaxy had forgotten. Something the Elder had prayed would never return. And far across the stars, as Terran warships drifted through shadows and old engines roared back to life, the humans prepared for the moment the sky would turn deadly. Across the galaxy, the fear of humans grew quietly, spreading like a cold wind that slipped under every door, into every control room, and through every ship corridor, yet no one wanted to admit it, not even to themselves. Strange events began happening everywhere, small at first but terrifying to anyone who understood patterns. A patrol ship near the Nebula Gate reported seeing a massive shadow drifting behind the gases, something so large it blocked out entire stars for minutes at a time. But when scanners locked on, nothing appeared, as if the shadow itself was alive. On the trade routes, ships that carried weapons to anti-human factions vanished without any distress call or explosion. They were simply gone, leaving only empty space behind. A cargo pilot swore he saw a human warship the size of a mountain gliding silently above a dead moon. But no one believed him until 3 other pilots reported the same thing. The Council tried to hide these reports, terrified of panic, but every corridor in their grand palace buzzed with whispers. The humans are moving. The elders of different worlds gathered secretly, sharing what they felt deep in their bones. A shift, a pulse, like something powerful was rising from a long sleep. But their young rulers refused to listen, saying humans were too emotional to ever win a war, calling Terrans soft, fragile, sentimental creatures who would break before they fought. But even their words trembled now. And far from all their arrogance, in the silent heart of the Milky Way, something enormous began to awaken. A forgotten Terran megastructure, hidden inside a fractured asteroid belt, powered on for the first time in centuries, its dark metal glowing faintly like a sleeping beast opening one eye. Human engineers, who had lived their entire lives believing they would never see war, now stood inside that massive structure with shaking hands, whispering, "It's time." But this awakening was not violent, it was sorrowful. Human workers moved like ghosts, not cheering, not celebrating, because they knew what this activation meant. Someone had pushed their people too far. On Earth, mothers held their children close as the skies darkened with the shapes of old Terran ships rising from hidden underground vaults, their engines humming with ancient power. Fathers stood silently in doorways watching the horizon glow with the launch of massive transports carrying civilians to safe zones. No one spoke loudly. No one cried. No one panicked. The silence was the worst part. It was a silence filled with heartbreak, not rage. Humanity did not want war, but humanity could not run from it anymore. And this silence traveled across the stars like a warning. On the Council world, the human ambassador entered the Grand Chamber one last time. Every alien stared at him, waiting for him to beg for mercy, to apologize, to bow. Instead, he placed a small silver device on the center table and said in a calm, steady voice that echoed across the hall, "This is the last thing we will ever give you, truth." He tapped the device. A hologram burst out, showing the destruction of the Terran medical ship. The ship the Council had blamed humans for losing, the ship they mocked humanity over. It showed Council ships firing first. It showed human medics dying in silence, reaching out to help even as they were burned. It showed undeniable betrayal. And then the recording ended. Silence fell so heavy it crushed every word in the room. The young leaders looked shocked. The elders closed their eyes in pain. But the human ambassador didn't shout, didn't accuse, didn't threaten. He simply said, "We will not return." Then he walked out, and every alien in the hall knew something had cracked. On a distant outpost, a group of soldiers spotted a strange object drifting toward them, small, metallic, unarmed. They laughed at how weak it looked, thinking it was a human mistake. But when it opened, it projected a single message across the base. A message from Earth Command that said, "Prepare your sky." The moment the words faded, every light in the base flickered, every scanner died, every alarm turned on, and the soldiers realized too late what this message meant. The humans were not coming to negotiate anymore. They were coming with something the galaxy had not seen in centuries. Meanwhile, on our Kinder, the elder stood in the dark forest, staring at the sky as if watching stars rearrange themselves, his breath shaking as he whispered, "They gave you peace. You answered with fire. Now they will return fire." The wind howled like the cry of something ancient awakening, and the planet's animals ran in panic as if sensing a storm beyond nature. And far across space, on the edge of the Orion Rim, a Terran fleet cloaked in darkness shifted into formation. Hundreds of warships moving in total silence, their hulls absorbing starlight like black mirrors. They did not roar. They did not flash. They simply moved forward like a shadow swallowing the horizon. The first true sign came when a giant wormhole tore open above the Council capital world. Not with sound, not with explosions, but with a slow, terrifying hum that made every creature on the surface freeze where they stood. A ship emerged. A single massive Terran dreadnought unlike anything the galaxy had ever created, ancient, scarred, and silent. No weapons fired. No threats broadcast. It just hovered there, staring down at the planet like a judge deciding a sentence. Children cried. Soldiers dropped their weapons. Leaders fell to their knees. Because this was not humanity showing power, this was humanity showing patience ending. And in that moment, the galaxy finally understood something the Elder had been screaming for years. Humans were not dangerous because they wanted war. Humans were dangerous because they avoided war until the last possible second. And when humans finally chose to fight, nothing survived the storm. The moment the Terran dreadnought appeared above the Council capital, the entire galaxy seemed to stop breathing, as if every world, every moon, every drifting station suddenly understood it had stepped too close to a sleeping predator, and now that predator had opened its eyes. The ship did not fire a single shot, yet its presence felt like a mountain pressing down on the atmosphere, making buildings tremble, oceans ripple, and living creatures feel a weight in their chest they could not explain. On the surface, crowds gathered in terror, staring up as the massive vessel blocked out the sun, turning day into a cold twilight. Children clung to their parents, asking what the dark shape in the sky was, but no one had an answer. Soldiers stood frozen, not because they were ordered to, but because their instincts screamed that raising a weapon would be suicide. Inside the dreadnought, unseen by any alien eyes, humans moved with chilling calm, activating old systems with steady hands, not celebrating, not shouting, only following orders that carried the weight of centuries of patience finally ending. On the ground, the council leaders gathered in panic, their voices shaky as they demanded explanations, but all their screens were dead, all their scanners were blind, all their communications jammed by a silent human code that spread across the planet like a ghost wind. The human ambassador, who had walked out hours earlier, now sat inside a small shuttle hidden among the streets, watching the sky quietly, his face full of heartbreak rather than triumph. He never wanted this. No human did. But the galaxy forced their hand. And while he watched the dreadnought above, he whispered the same words the elder once said, "We forgive too much, and this is what it causes." Meanwhile, on Arkinder, the elder fell to his knees in the forest as the energy wave from the dreadnought reached his world, not harming it, but shaking something ancient inside him, a memory of a war his ancestors barely survived. He saw visions, burning skies, shattered fleets, humans standing in silent rows as entire empires begged for mercy. Tears ran down his wrinkled face as he whispered, "They didn't listen. They never listen." Back on the capital, the council finally worked up the courage to send ships toward the dreadnought. Tiny cruisers trembling in formation, but before they even reached halfway, the dreadnought released a single pulse, a soft glow spreading like a slow heartbeat. It didn't destroy the cruisers. It simply shut everything off. Weapons, engines, lights, gravity. The alien ships floated helplessly like dead leaves in a storm. Panic erupted worldwide. People screamed. Leaders fell apart. The ground shook as old alarm systems wailed across cities. But the dreadnought still did not fire. Instead, a single beam of blue light descended gently onto the council palace, and from that beam walked a lone human figure. An envoy wearing black Terran armor that hummed with energy so ancient and powerful that even the bravest guards stepped back. The envoy spoke with a voice that echoed through every speaker, every radio, every device that had been dead a moment earlier. "Humanity does not seek war, but you have taken from us. You have mocked our dead. You have broken what we protected. And now we stand here not to conquer you, but to remind you who we are." The entire planet listened in complete silence, even the animals stopping to hear the voice. The envoy continued, "We asked for peace. You answered with betrayal. Now your skies will reflect your choices." As he spoke, more wormholes began to open in the upper atmosphere, each one revealing a different Terran warship, silent, massive, and older than most civilizations alive. The council collapsed to their knees, finally realizing that the dreadnought they feared was only the beginning. In their panic, one alien general screamed for his soldiers to fire. But the soldiers refused. They saw the fleet above and knew there was no point. The elder on Arkinder trembled as he sensed each ship activating, each engine humming with the power of a forgotten era, and he whispered, "They begged you to stop, and you laughed." In the capital, the envoy stepped closer to the council, his eyes not angry but deeply wounded, like someone carrying pain far heavier than any revenge. "This is not our war," he said softly. "This is the consequence of yours." Behind him, the sky lit up as Terran ships formed a ring around the planet, their hulls glowing with an energy the galaxy had not seen in hundreds of years. Every alien heart broke in terror as they realized the truth. Humans had held back all this time. Humans had watched, forgiven, warned, and now they were done. And as the dreadnought lowered its shadow across the capital city, the last thing anyone felt was not fear of destruction, but fear of what humanity would decide next. The galaxy had never seen anything like the formation that now surrounded the council capital. A silent ring of Terran warships stretching across the sky like a dark halo of judgment, each ship ancient yet alive, humming with power so deep it made the air vibrate. And as the shadows of these giants fell on the world below, fear spread through every city, every street, every corner. People saw the sky darken and felt something inside them sink, something primal that whispered this was not an invasion, it was a reckoning. The council leaders stumbled out of their palace, their robes dragging through the dust as they stared upward with shaking eyes, realizing at last that every insult, every lie, every betrayal they had thrown at humanity had led to this moment. These ships had not arrived to conquer. They had arrived to remind the galaxy who humans truly were. And that truth was far more terrifying than any enemy they had ever imagined. On distant worlds, citizens watched the broadcast in stunned silence as the first clear image of the Terran Armada filled their screens. Some dropped to their knees. Some whispered prayers. Some simply stared, unable to understand how humans, those small, emotional creatures, could build ships that made even the strongest empires tremble. Meanwhile, in the heart of that giant dreadnought, human commanders stood around a glowing table, their faces lit by holographic maps showing enemy fleets, council systems, and hundreds of hidden Terran bases that had stayed quiet until now. They were not angry. They were not full of rage. They were simply tired of centuries of being underestimated, tired of pretending to be weak, tired of swallowing insult after insult in the name of peace. One commander placed his hand on the table, whispering, "We gave them everything, and this is how they repaid us." His voice cracked, not with hatred but with sorrow. Outside, as thousands of aliens stared up in terror, the Terran fleet shifted formation with a precision that looked almost supernatural, moving in perfect silence, like shadows sweeping across the night sky. The elder of our kinder watched it all from his world, tears streaming down his face, his heart heavy with grief because he knew exactly what was coming next. He had carried the old warnings for decades, warnings passed through generations like a curse. Do not betray the humans. Do not push them. Do not break their kindness. But the galaxy had laughed. Now they faced the cost. Back on the capital, the Terran envoy stepped forward again, his armor glowing faintly as he looked down at the council kneeling before him, their pride shattered, their words lost. He took a slow breath and spoke with a calm that cut deeper than any threat. You believed we were weak because we chose peace. You believed we were harmless because we offered help. You believed we were small because we tried to avoid war. You believed wrong. As his words echoed through the city, the ships above shifted again, revealing the full size of the Armada, hundreds of vessels stretching to the planet's edge, their silhouettes like massive black wings. The council's strongest general began to cry quietly, realizing that his entire career, all his speeches about human weakness, were nothing but foolish bravado in the face of this terrifying reality. Far away, on different planets, alien families held each other tightly, whispering that the humans were coming, that the age of arrogance was over. Some begged their leaders to apologize to Earth, to kneel, to surrender before the sky opened with fire. But humanity still did not attack, still did not destroy, still did not fire a single weapon. Instead, they sent another message across every ship, every world, every device. One simple sentence that made even the bravest warriors feel their blood run cold. This ends when you answer for what you've done. It was not a threat. It was a judgment. And the worst part was that the galaxy knew humans meant every word. The dreadnought lowered a few meters more, its shadow swallowing the capital palace until even the tallest towers disappeared into darkness. And in that moment every alien felt the same thing, a heavy, crushing guilt that they had created this storm with their own hands. Humanity had not come for revenge. Humanity had come for justice. And justice always arrived with a storm. As the Terran Armada tightened its silent ring around the council capital, the atmosphere on the planet grew heavy, so heavy that even the wind seemed afraid to move, as if the world itself feared waking a giant. The once proud generals who spent years mocking humanity now stood like trembling statues, unable to breathe as the shadows of human warships stretched across the city like dark wings of judgment. The dreadnought above slowly shifted, its hull glowing with faint blue veins of ancient energy, each pulse matching the calm heartbeat of a predator that had waited too long to strike. But even now, humanity did not fire. That was what terrified the galaxy most. Humans weren't roaring, they weren't threatening, they weren't launching missiles. No, humans were silent, still watching. And that silence felt like the edge of a knife resting against the throat of every empire. In distant systems, alien civilians gathered around screens, holding onto each other with shaking hands as the human envoy's message played again and again, his voice calm enough to break the strongest spirits. This ends when you answer for what you've done. On Arkinder, the elder gripped his ancient staff, his knuckles white, his heart cracking with each passing second because he knew humans were giving the galaxy one final chance. One last fragile thread of mercy before the storm consumed everything. He whispered into the wind, "Please, someone listen, before the sky burns." But the galaxy had always been slow to learn. Inside the Terran dreadnought, human commanders moved with deep sadness instead of anger. Maps showed every council fleet preparing in secret, gathering weapons, powering stations, hoping to launch a surprise attack against humanity, hoping to strike first while the Armada was still tightening formation. They believed humans didn't know. They believed humans couldn't see. But Terran sensors had locked onto every movement hours before. A young human officer, barely old enough to remember peace, looked at the incoming data and whispered, "Why do they always choose the wrong path?" Another commander answered softly, "Because they think our mercy is weakness." The officer stared at the hologram of council ships arming themselves for war and felt her heart break. She said, "If we respond, people will die billions." The commander put a gentle hand on her shoulder and replied, "We didn't choose this day. They did." Back on the capital, the council leaders gathered in a panic, their voices cracking as they argued about what to do. Some demanded surrender. Some demanded negotiation. Some demanded a final attack. But none of them could agree, because for the first time in their lives, they were looking into the eyes of true power, and power that had been patient for centuries was far more terrifying than power that shouted. Outside, alien civilians flooded the streets, kneeling, crying, praying, begging to their gods that humans would spare them, because the sight of the fleet above felt like standing beneath a mountain ready to fall. And then it happened. The sky lit up with a sudden flare as a massive council fleet, over 100 ships, jumped into the system from hyperspace, engines burning bright as they moved directly toward the Terran Armada. The citizens screamed. The council cursed. Even the elder on Arkinder collapsed to his knees in despair, because he knew what that fleet represented. A final insult, a final betrayal, a final attempt to crush humanity instead of apologizing. The Terran dreadnought turned slowly, facing the incoming ships like an old warrior lifting its head for the first time in decades. Human scanners identified the enemy instantly. Commanders exchanged heavy looks. No words were needed. The envoy on the surface raised his head, sorrow in his eyes as he whispered into his communicator. They made their choice. The sky above the capital twisted as the council fleet opened fire. Massive blasts of plasma and antimatter streaking toward the Terran Armada. Civilians screamed and ran. Leaders fell apart. The elder cried. And in that one frozen moment, every alien heart shattered, because they realized they had just thrown the first punch at a force that had begged them not to fight. The human fleet finally moved, but not with rage, not with chaos, not with noise. They moved like a single living creature. A shadow, a breath, a silent storm, each ship sliding into formation, absorbing enemy fire with shields that glowed calmly, almost peacefully, as if the attacks were nothing but gentle rain against iron walls. And in that moment, the galaxy understood something it had ignored for centuries. Humans did not need to show their power. They were power. the Terran dreadnought's lights dimmed to a deep, terrifying blue, a color ancient records once called humanity's last warning. And as that glow spread across its massive hull, a whisper went through every living being watching, a whisper that felt like the sky itself speaking. Now the storm begins. The moment the Terran dreadnought glowed with that deep, ancient blue light, every living creature across the galaxy felt the same cold shiver run through their bones, as if the universe itself leaned closer to watch what humanity would do next. And in that terrifying stillness, the Council fleet continued firing desperately, pouring every weapon they had into the silent human formation, refusing to accept that their enemy had already surpassed them in every way. But the human ships did not break, did not even flinch. The blasts simply vanished against their shields like raindrops falling into an endless ocean. On the surface below, millions of aliens watched the sky burn with streaks of light, their hearts sinking deeper with each passing second because they finally realized they were witnessing something far more devastating than war. They were witnessing the moment the galaxy's arrogance came face to face with human patience ending. The human envoy stepped forward, his black armor reflecting the burning horizon, and he closed his eyes for a long, painful moment, feeling the sorrow of billions of Terrans who never wanted this day. "You forced our hand," he whispered to himself, voice trembling not with rage but with heartbreak. In the dreadnought above, a young human officer stared at the incoming Council fleet with watery eyes, whispering, "Why are they still shooting? Don't they understand?" But the commander beside her shook his head slowly, his face carved with years of carrying responsibility no one thanked him for. "They don't want to understand. They want to believe we are weak. And weakness is something we never were." As the Council fleet drew closer, preparing for a direct collision, a strange silence washed over the battlefield, the kind that comes before a lightning strike, sharp and heavy, filled with the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. Then something impossible happened. The dreadnought released a soft ripple across its hull, a pulse that looked harmless but carried the force of a collapsing star behind it. It spread across space like a wave of quiet light. When the wave touched the Council ships, every engine turned cold, every weapon shut down, every shield flickered and died. The alien soldiers looked at their screens in horror as every system turned to dark static. Their ships became silent tombs drifting helplessly in front of the Terran armada. Not destroyed, not attacked, just disabled. And that was the moment fear turned into something deeper, respect. Millions watching across the galaxy froze as they realized what humanity had just demonstrated. They didn't stop the fleet with violence. They didn't answer fire with fire. They simply shut the enemy down, like a parent gently taking a weapon from a child who didn't know what danger truly was. The elder of our kinder collapsed to the ground, tears flowing freely, whispering, "They warned you with mercy, and you still mocked them." His voice trembled as he cried to the sky, knowing he was too late. On the Capitol below, the Council leaders fell into despair, their arrogance finally shattering like fragile glass. Some begged the envoy for forgiveness, some begged for mercy, some just stared in numb silence, realizing that everything they believed about humans was a lie created by their own pride. But the envoy did not look at them. He was looking at the sky, at the drifting enemy ships, at the burning horizon, grieving for what he knew would happen next. Above, the Terran commanders exchanged painful glances. They had tried everything to avoid bloodshed, but the galaxy had insisted on war. The dreadnought dimmed its blue glow, settling into a darker color, one that ancient records once described as the color of human sorrow. And in that moment, every alien realized the most terrifying truth of all. Humans were not fighting because they wanted to win. They were fighting because they had been given no other choice. And a human fighting with no choice was the most unstoppable force in the galaxy. As the Terran armada slowly rearranged its formation, preparing for the next phase, a single phrase echoed through every device, every ship, every world, carried on a calm human voice that was soft enough to break the hardest heart. "This is not our revenge. This is your consequence." And with that, the galaxy understood the storm had not even fully begun as the Terran armada shifted into its final formation. The galaxy felt as if time itself slowed, every heartbeat echoing with fear, regret, and the heavy truth that no one, not a single empire, not a single council, not a single leader, had truly understood humanity until this moment when the sky above the council capital glowed with the combined light of 1,000 human warships preparing for their final decision. The drifting council fleet, stripped of power and drifting helplessly like broken bones of arrogance, watched the Terran dreadnought advance toward them with the calm, steady movement of a judge walking toward a guilty throne. And on the surface below, millions of aliens held each other tightly, tears running down their faces as they stared up at the horizon where human ships burned brighter than suns, the heat of justice washing across the cities. In the middle of the capital square, the human envoy stepped forward once more, the fading daylight turning his armor into a mirror of fire as he raised his head toward the sky. His voice trembled with emotion. Not anger, not triumph, but the deep sorrow of a species pushed past every limit. "We asked for peace," he spoke softly, yet his voice was carried into every speaker, every street, every mind. "And you answered with betrayal. Now the fate of your world depends on what you choose next, not what we choose." The council leaders, broken and shaking, crawled forward, begging for forgiveness in voices so desperate they cracked with every word. But the envoy didn't look at them. He kept his gaze on the sky, waiting for the final signal from the dreadnought, the signal that would decide whether this world lived under human judgment or died under its own mistakes. Above, inside the dreadnought's command center, Terran commanders watched the alien fleet drift in silence, their hearts heavy. A young officer whispered, "Sir, if we fire, there will be nothing left." The commander closed his eyes, fighting back the weight of centuries in his voice. "We are not here to destroy. We are here to end what they started." And with a slow motion, he placed his hand on the final control crystal. The dreadnought responded with a deep vibration that shook the atmosphere, sending waves of light rippling across the planet. Every being looked up in terror, thinking this was the end, but then something unexpected happened. Instead of fire, instead of destruction, instead of the apocalypse the galaxy feared, the Terran dreadnought sent a beam of white light toward the drifting enemy ships. When the beam touched them, it didn't destroy them. It restored them. Engines flickered. Shields began to hum. Life support systems activated. The council ships slowly regained power, not because they fought for it, but because humans gave it back. Gasps echoed across the galaxy. On Arkinder, the elder collapsed in relief, whispering, "Mercy, even now," and tears soaked into the dirt beneath him. On the capital, the envoy finally looked at the council. His eyes filled not with rage but with the painful disappointment of a teacher who watched his students burn their future. "This is the last time we save you," he said quietly. "There will not be another." Above, the Terran armada began to rise, their engines glowing softly as they prepared to leave the system. But before going, the dreadnought sent out one final transmission, a message broadcast across the entire galaxy, reaching every world, every empire, every creature with the clarity of truth spoken without fear. Humanity does not seek power. Humanity seeks respect. If you threaten our peace again, we will not return with warnings. The message echoed through the stars like a cold wind, leaving every empire trembling, every leader speechless. And then, for the first time since the beginning of the conflict, the Terran fleet turned away. One by one, like giants disappearing into the horizon, the ships folded into wormholes and vanished from the skies without firing a single shot. But the silence they left behind was louder than war. On the council capital, the aliens stared at the empty sky, some falling to their knees, others crying, all realizing the same devastating truth. Humanity had the power to destroy them, yet chose to spare them. And that choice was the greatest fear of all. Because mercy from a force that powerful meant only one thing: the galaxy had been given its final chance. And somewhere across the stars, on a quiet world called Earth, humans looked toward the night sky not with pride, but with a heavy heart, knowing the storm they had unleashed was not out of desire but out of necessity. And from that day forward, whenever the galaxy remembered this moment, they whispered the same words in trembling voices: The elders were right, humans were the last species you should ever push.